Good afternoon, good evening, possibly good morning to everyone. This is the third session of the three webinars of GMS to celebrate the entry into force of Hong Kong Convention. This final session looks ahead to the regulatory landscape beyond today, and it includes the interaction of Hong Kong Convention and Basel Convention. I'm Nikos Mikelis. I am the moderator, and I'm also the current chairman of BIMCO Ship Recycling Alliance. We have with us the following panelists. We have David Loosley, who is the Secretary General and CEO of BIMCO, and who has been extremely supportive in the effort to set up the alliance and to help it progress. We have Sveinung Oftedal, who is a specialist director of the Norwegian Ministry of Climate and Environment. Sveinung, by the way, was responsible for submitting the first draft of what became Hong Kong Convention and which formed the basis for its development. I've worked with Sveinung for many years, and we have had some very, very interesting times. Anaëlle Boudry, Senior Policy Advisor of European Community Shipowners Association. Anaëlle has got a number of issues on environmental matters, including ship recycling. Dr. Petros Varelidis is Secretary General, Natural Environment and Waters in the Greek Ministry of Environment and Energy. With Petros also we have had a lot of very interesting collaboration in the time when European regulation was being drafted, and Petros was the person who was responsible for making it happen and responsible for the good parts of it. A few things happened after Petros' involvement, but that is another story. George Novak, Vice President Commercial for the Liberian International Ship and Corporate Registry. Liberia has been quite proactive in the Hong Kong Convention into the entry into force and also into implementation of it, I understand, as far as ship owners with Liberian flagships are concerned. And last but not least is Anne-Christine Stucker, Senior Sustainability Advisor for ABN AMRO. It was important, I felt, to have the financial institutions' involvement in this webinar, because we like it or not, they have responsibilities and they have influence, and it's good to hear their views. So I thank the panelists for joining us, and with their experience and expertise, we should be able to throw some light on the overlaps and conflicts of the different regulatory instruments that are presently in force and which are used for, rightly or wrongly, for the recycling of ships regulations. I will start with a brief introduction on the key issues, and I will then invite the panel to address a few prepared questions. And after around 45 minutes, we will discuss questions that have been posed by the audience using the facilities of Zoom. I hope to address as many of these questions as possible, but time is limited. So today we celebrate the entry into force of Hong Kong Convention. I must stress a milestone that today is 21 years after COP7, the Conference of the Parties of Basel Convention, in 2004, formally requested IMO to develop mandatory requirements for the environmental sound management of ship dismantling, as they call it. It was Basel Convention that asked for it. 3-4 years before that, IMO had discussed ship scrapping, I think it was called then, and had started work on some voluntary guidelines. But the formal request for a mandatory instrument for a convention came from Basel Convention 21 years ago. 20 years ago, IMO's assembly agreed and requested the Marine Environment Protection Committee to develop this instrument. And 16 years ago, we had the diplomatic conference that adopted the convention. It's been a long time, but a lot has taken place. A lot of necessary developments have taken place in that time. For example, the recycling industry in India has been transformed, totally transformed. There's very few yards that are not now operating with the standards of Hong Kong Convention. Also, Bangladesh has had a number of yards now comply, and more yards are in process and are working to their compliance. And as we heard about an hour ago, Pakistan also is in the process of looking for compliance and working towards the compliance. So all that is good, and all that has happened until now. And today we've arrived at what looks like the promised land. However, we are not there yet. There are some complications that were introduced in the way. And these are what this session will discuss. First of all, it's worth noting in 2013, European Union adopted the European Ship Recycling Regulation, whose aim at that time was to facilitate the ratification and implementation of Hong Kong Convention in European Union state countries. However, in its implementation of the EU SRR, it has unfortunately created some complications. To a large extent, by Europe's adherence to the obligations it has under Basel Convention's ban amendments. The result is that European Commission has so far only approved yards in OECD countries, and it is therefore uncertain on whether or when ships flying the flag of European countries who are part of the Hong Kong Convention will be able to be recycled in compliant yards in non-OECD countries. The idea of the convention is that all the yards in countries that are compliant, that are parties, should be accessible, but European regulation appears to stand in the way of that. More recently, and probably in spirit of trying to show environmental sensitivities, Brazil adopted the EU SRR as its regulation for ship recycling. I cannot fathom their logic, other than the Brazilian regulators probably wanting to absolve themselves of having to think too much about this issue. In a similar vein, today also marks the entry into force of another EU SRR Basel Convention variant, which is the United Arab Emirates Ship Recycling Regulation. This applies to all UAE flagged ships and to all non-UAE flagged ships that are in UAE territorial waters. Somehow, it also intends to forbid reflagging of UAE end-of-life ships, and it also bans the beaching and the grounding method of recycling. One wonders who advised UAE regulator and with what motivation, although I do have my suspicions. All these issues, however, are insignificant when compared to the main problem. And by that, I reminded you earlier on that COP7 of Basel Convention in 2004 asked IMO to develop its convention. As we know, that has happened, and the convention has replicated the prior informed consent of the Basel Convention, but not by using the state of export, nor by involving the transit state, but instead by using the flag state of the vessel, the recycling state, and all the arrangements behind the International Ready for Recycling certificate. However, Basel Convention has not recognized, has not agreed that Hong Kong Convention is equivalent to Basel Convention, and therefore we are at a difficult position that ships that are compliant to the requirements of Hong Kong Convention can be detained and their owners can be persecuted if departing from a state that either is a party to Basel Convention and wants to implement the prior informed consent procedures of Basel Convention, which are very time-consuming and perhaps not appropriate to ships. And even worse, if that ship is departing from a ban amendment party, which happens to be an OECD country. In that case, I suppose the ship owner is going to have much heavier problems. In 2011, COP10 of Basel Convention in Cartagena considered whether Hong Kong Convention can be deemed equivalent to Basel Convention. I attended that meeting, maybe Sveinung did, I don't recall. But what I witnessed was a relentless lobbying by the NGO platform, who are very active in the Basel Convention. And NGO platform managed to convince two countries, one in the Caribbean and one West African, to support their opposition to Hong Kong Convention. And so these two parties refused to accept the equivalency. At that time, the COP was very focused on trying to get the ban amendments ratified, and they had some difficult discussions. And I believe that for that reason, the presidency did not take much interest in the equivalence of Hong Kong Convention. Since that date, we have not had any discussions in Basel Convention on the equivalency, nor anyone has raised the issue. But the only relevant development that has happened is, since 2010, was when MEPC 82, a year and a half ago, adopted a provisional guidance which contains, and I'm quoting, an option that parties of the two conventions may wish to consider in their efforts to provide clarity with respect to the transboundary movement of ships intended for recycling. The idea behind this provisional guidance being that a state that is party only to Hong Kong Convention would have Hong Kong Convention apply, a state that is party only to Basel Convention would apply Basel Convention, and a state that is party to both conventions would have the choice of declaring that they wish to apply Hong Kong Convention. This is, in my view, very problematic, and it doesn't solve anything, because one state might think whatever and might declare whatever it likes. The other states that the ship is going through, either as a state of export or state of transit, may have very different views. So I must be blunt and say that the proposed solution cannot and will not work. Basel Convention bases its controls on the exporting, importing, and transit states. The unilateral declaration by a flag state will not sway the authorities of the exporting states. That is the fear I have. I will not take time explaining further reasons why this will not work. Maybe the panel might wish to discuss some of this. However, I must say that the benefit of having Hong Kong Convention as an international convention to regulate ship recycling is being torpedoed by the inability to be able to rely on it. So COP17 was held in April-May of this year. In its agenda, it considered the provisional guidance of MEPC at MEPC's request, and then it passed it to its working group, which takes place next year. I very much doubt that the open-ended working group will have too much to say that is of much use. And I believe that what will happen is they will pass their view to COP18 in 2027. So 2 years from now, in that period, ships will be sailing, will be possibly be detained, and will have problems. And the European issue also is not solved. So even if COP18 accepts and blesses the guidelines, we cannot be fooled that this will ensure that HKC will provide an undisputed set of regulations. Instead, we will have a patchwork or a mosaic of ports where ship owners can go, and ship owners have to be very careful if they have an end-of-life ship. The only thing that will cure that is to have a COP decide on the equivalency of the two conventions, and that will pave then the way for Hong Kong being the newer and the specific regulation or convention to take its place for ships that fall under the scope of Hong Kong Convention. So, to conclude, I feel aggrieved that it is the same governments that met in 2004 and asked IMO to develop the convention. IMO developed the convention, which we have seen has worked very well, has done amazing things in a period prior to its entry into force. Now the same governments are failing to do the necessary joint-up thinking and agree that the task is completed and that equivalency is there, and therefore Hong Kong Convention could move forward. Surely we expect more from the regulator. Now, that finishes my explanation of what I feel is the background to this this seminar or webinar, and I've put together some questions, which I'll start. I will open to the panel. The first question is, since 2006, the NGO platform and their affiliates have vigorously argued that it was a waste of time to develop Hong Kong Convention instead of relying on the Basel Convention to regulate end-of-life ships. Could they be right in that claim? Considering that the European Union enforces to end-of-life ships its regulation of shipment of waste, which is Basel Convention and Ban Amendment, do we still see a benefit in developing, ratifying, and bringing into force Hong Kong Convention? Why shouldn't instead more countries follow the example of Europe in enforcing Basel Convention and be done with? The floor is yours.
I would say that there are still benefits of bringing Hong Kong Convention into force because, as you rightfully said, it's focusing on ship recycling. And it provides clear guidelines on how ships should be prepared for recycling, which also includes the removal of all the hazardous materials and the documentation required, which is not specifically mentioned in the Basel Convention. And also, just a few countries in the EU have ratified Hong Kong Convention, but it's spanning globally. So I think it's way more forcefully from a global perspective. And yeah, it includes the concept of flag states, which I think is just the primary mechanism that can work in shipping.
I have total sympathy with everything you say, but Basel Convention, I should point, has got 200 parties or more, almost 200 parties. Hong Kong Convention got 25. So the spread is in favor of Basel, but okay, I take the technical points. I will pass the floor to all. I'll start with Sveinung, as he's on the top right, left on my screen.
Now, Nikos, where to start on this question? Now, in the long history of this, I think you provided a good overview. But let me be clear, the Basel Convention, we are party to both the Hong Kong and the Basel, was never developed to address ship recycling. Ship recycling was included as a part of a legal interpretation afterwards, meaning does it apply, yes or no? Now, so when we developed the Hong Kong Convention, of course, the Basel Convention was in force and still we had a problem. And then it was clear for everybody, also the parties to the Basel Convention, that we needed to have a dedicated convention on ship recycling. And looking into what the various conventions is addressing, it is only the Hong Kong Convention which is fully addressing the topic, meaning addressing the ship from cradle to grave. And if you say you take away the Hong Kong Convention, what do you then have? You actually have nothing. You have the Ban Amendment, which can easily be circumvention, and you have the same volume of ship recycling taking place in the same countries all the time. So you have the Ban Amendment, and then you have the technical guidelines, which is developed a long time ago under the Basel Convention. So in order to solve the problem, it is in very, very, very few cases the Basel Convention comes to application. So then we have actually nothing. So meaning Where are we now? Actually, it is for the parties to the conventions to be brave enough to fulfill what we started. Actually, it is not an issue of whether the Hong Kong Convention is appropriate or not. It is actually an issue now where we need to sort out how we can have one regime instead of regimes, meaning two global regimes, in addition to the regional EU regime, which is making it very complicated for the shipping industry and the ship recycling industry, and also for the parties which need what to enforce. What is legal in one situation and illegal in another situation. So as I see it, as I normally see it, is now how to provide the legal certainty. And a final issue I want to say is that it is actually the party to a convention who decides how to interpret in the implications of a convention. So regardless on how the COP meeting decides on the Article 11 option, it is actually Norway as a party who decides whether or not to use the Article 11 or not. It's not somebody else. So the question is, are they right in claiming that the Hong Kong Convention is a waste of time? No. It is actually the Hong Kong Convention which has provided the improvement of the recycling facilities as we have seen. It is a Hong Kong Convention requirements which has actually have the shipping industry now being focused and prepared for proper ship recycling. So it is the Hong Kong Convention we should build upon in the future.
Sveinung, I have only admiration for every sentence you gave, except of one. I appreciate that every party is able to decide. But if that is the case, where is the international convention? Where is the uniform international agreement that a ship that has its IRRC can proceed and go to the yard with which it's contracted?
Okay. It is actually the issue of Article 11 option, I guess you are addressing, if that is your question. Now, looking into how to provide clarity in this one, would it be possible to have an amendment of the Basel Convention? Yes or no? I think no. Would it be possible to have a clear COP decision based on your explanation of what happens previously, that actually how it is possible to take decision on the Basel Convention? I think that will be difficult. Meaning it will be legally that in order to have in our legislation what we shall enforce, we need to do something legally. We can just silently close our eyes and say this doesn't apply, or we can make this statement and encourage others to make the statement that actually to use the Article 11 option of the Basel and say, well, when it comes to ship recycling, that is what we will implement and enforce. Okay.
George?
Yes, hi, Nikos. As Sveinung and Anne had pointed out, I'll lower my hand here, had pointed out, there's a problem with the Basel Convention is it wasn't necessarily written with ship recycling in mind. It was written with hazardous waste aboard ships in mind. So the primary benefit, and I think the Hong Kong Convention is extremely important, is not only did it help ship recycling facilities be able to upgrade and be able to have a little bit more teeth in enforcement, but it actually coupled flag state with some of the regulations enforcement, which coming from a flag state is extremely important because most of the time there's not really a connection between where the ship is going before it goes to the recycling yard or the scrap yard. So there's not really an onus for the ship owner to have any sort of connection with that port or with that country that is leaving. And they can utilize that to their advantage and not necessarily spend the time in port, do the due diligence, take a month or 2 months in order to do all the paperwork for the hazardous materials. They can just change their direction or go to a transient port on the way. So putting the onus on the actual regulatory body, which is the flag state, prevents the idea of a ship owner either jumping flags or trying to identify a way around the hazardous, material declarations, and instead has to actually get an IRRC and have the IHM be able to identify what's on board the vessel before it goes to the scrapyard. And that responsibility comes to the flag state, which has to approve its ability to even sail. So the fact that the Paris MOU also has recognized Hong Kong Convention will hopefully deter some detentions there, or some legal back and forth between who should take priority. But I think it's very important for the Hong Kong Convention to remain, or to have a little bit more teeth and be in effect, and hopefully the harmonization of both of the conventions will lead to a little bit more of a push for the Hong Kong Convention to be approved by more than 25 states, as you said previously.
The number of states is immaterial because 4 states who recycle 95 to 98% of the world's tonnage are already parties. So all ships really would be going towards Hong Kong Convention yards. Nevertheless, the positions you explained, you should try and explain to the NGO platform, because they don't seem to understand any of that. I asked David to take the floor next, please.
Thanks, Nikos. And we've already heard a lot of detail from George and yourself and from Sveinung, and I agree with everything that's been said so far. Now, obviously, I accept there's lots of challenges ahead, but I think we should take a moment to reflect on the fact that this is a momentous occasion, and congratulations should go out to all those, including you, Nikos, who've been party to building what is a significant potential to change the shape of ship recycling. So I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. Yes, we've got a few things to fix, because I think as shipping, and looking at it from a ship owner's perspective, we are hugely fortunate to have a global regulator in the IMO. And I guess I'm stating the blindingly obvious here, aren't I? But ships are mobile assets. They trade in multiple jurisdictions. And as Sveinung had already referenced, the Basel framework was not designed on that. It was designed in the 1980s for static land-based movement of hazardous waste, not designed to address the complex realities of shipping and, of course, global trade. Hong Kong was, on the other hand, designed for that with an end-to-end system. And so I think the very fact that today there is in force a global standard applicable to all ships, all nations, and all ship recycling facilities has got to be a good move. But from our perspective as ship owners, we need clarity, and there is some confusion in the system. Shipping is a compliant industry. We're good at compliance. We've followed IMO conventions for many, many years, and I think with some very good success. Ship owners want to do the right thing, but we do need help from governments how to clarify that. And I listened with interest when Sveinung was talking about Article 11, and the likelihood it's going to be more down to the governments and the countries themselves to make that determination. It would be very difficult to achieve such an outcome at the Basel COP. But I guess ultimately it is that. I mean, we as the shipping industry can only advise, provide input, as I've already said, about how shipping actually works. But we do need to resolve this with some urgency. And we're very much, as I've already said, for global regulation. We have an expected huge amount of recycling to be done coming up. I mean, our shipping analysts here in Copenhagen estimate somewhere in the region of 16,000 ships are going to be required to be recycled in the next decade. That's huge. And there's no way we can do that as a world without the South Asian yards and without the Hong Kong Convention. So as I said at the outset, I accept there's a huge number of challenges ahead, but I think this is a step in the right direction. I think this is a significant step forward, and we need to start leaning in. This is very much the start, not the finish.
Thank you, David. Petros, before I give you the floor, I wanted also to ask you one question. As a Secretary General of a Ministry of Environment, can you see a way of asking Basel to consider seriously the issue of equivalency, or is that a dead effort?
I think the problem is that discussions that have been technical has been politicized. Has been politicized, first of all, by the European Commission and probably also by those that see the Basel Convention as some kind of a new religion, in the lack of the old religion that is replaced by a new religion. Each person has its own problems. We need to take everything into account and move forward. I think for me it is clear that, as many previous speakers said, we're talking about a lex specialis too. The Hong Kong Convention was designed specifically for recycling. That's it. If it was an issue of national legislation, there won't be an issue of interpretation. Basel Convention would not apply because ship recycling, Hong Kong Convention is lex specialis, and lex specialis applies as to when compared to the general, legislation that refers to everything. Okay, so I think we should get lost in the details. It doesn't help to get, in the meanders of complicated, arguments and thoughts. It's a very simple case. We, as Greece, as Norway, as China, as whatever, or as UAE, we have agreed on the Hong Kong Convention, and we need to apply the Hong Kong Convention, and we need to have the same position when we participate in the Basel Convention. We need to state clearly in the context of the Basel Convention that the Basel Convention is not fit for purpose for the future. That's why it's the Basel Convention that asked IMO to make the Hong Kong Convention to begin with. Okay, so it's not about arguing; it's self-evident. So, as not being bipolar or schizophrenic, I'm not a psychiatrist to make the right, diagnosis. We should be consistent, and that means we go to the Basel Convention and we say this is not the right instrument for ships. The right instrument is Hong Kong Convention. How do you want to do it? Do you want to bluntly exclude ships from Basel Convention? Fine, it's a very clear solution. Do you want to prove or pretend that we have equivalency? That's fine. That's fine too. What is equivalency? Equivalency is a term invented to show that two things that are not equal can be equal. Okay, that's in substance. So I don't care if it's going to be the one way or the other. And of course, the European Union hides behind the fact that Basel Convention is part of the EU acquis. Okay, but if Basel Convention clearly states that ships are out of the scope of Basel, problem is solved. I want you to remember too that there are two types of people: the idealists who have, okay, I mean, they're fine, okay, they see the world in a certain manner, and the opportunists. So if you look at the idealists, I think that everybody sees that the Hong Kong Convention is the one that made a difference, that led India, that led Pakistan, Bangladesh to improve the standards of their installation. If we didn't have this, if we did not have the Hong Kong Convention, it it will be still, the same old pictures that the NGO platform used to show 20 years ago.
Still do.
And it was problematic indeed. Okay, there is a big progress, and that's thanks to the Hong Kong Convention. As for the opportunities, the question is the following: having the European ship recycling regulation, which I have practically, redrafted from the beginning with your assistance. So it's kind of my child. Okay, we're not proud for all of our children, but yeah. What is the outcome at the end of the day in substance, in terms of added value in the EU context, in the EU geographical area? Has that brought so much business? I mean, do we have so many ships that don't go anymore to Turkey, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and they come to Europe? That's the question to pose, in order to show that it has not produced, what was expected to produce. So it's a waste of energy and time to follow it dogmatically in a religious manner. That's what I mean.
Petro, it's wonderful to hear what you say. I will ask you one question, though. You said we go to Basel and tell them. Who is we?
Well, we is the Greek government, for instance, and whoever else wants to come with us. The Greek state is about half the European fleet. Okay.
Yes.
So it's not so minor in terms of ownership. Okay. So we're talking lots of ships, but I believe this is something that Cypriots can follow. Maybe Estonia or Finland, maybe Malta. So Norway. So countries that have a strong ship tradition. I think for these countries, this is kind of obvious, I think.
Petro, it's such a delight to see you. I hate to make you feel uncomfortable, but I will ask you, where were you at COP17, April, May? And where was Norway? Where was India? Nobody spoke. But anyhow, I've said it. Anaëlle.
I will respond to that. I was personally have so many international trips that I can be everywhere. And that's part of the problem. I mean, when the issue has to do with the structure of the negotiations, when you go in a Basel Convention COP, it's the Basel people that discuss the issue. So for the Basel people, Basel is something sacred. Is a religion. So for those people, even being from Greece, it's not easy to say that, okay, this is not appropriate, we'll go for the other two, because the other two belongs to some other part of the administration. Somebody else is the other two. Alexandra, in our case, is the Basel Convention. The Hong Kong Convention is, Georgia, when, you see? So it's simple as that. So you don't look for strange explanation. Usually, the simplest explanation is the, closest to the truth.
No, I understand the reality. There is also a third type of person, the pragmatist, I suppose. Okay, Anaëlle.
Yes, thank you, Nikos. I guess the advantage or disadvantage of speaking last or after all the other panelists, that I can just concur with everything that has been said. That of course Hong Kong Convention needs to be the one we apply. And also it's great to be speaking on the day of the entry into force, because obviously Hong Kong Convention is the unique and relevant framework that we need to follow for sustainable ship recycling. And as European ship owners, we want to have a level playing field, to have that everyone applies the same global standards. It's very important for us because, of course, you know, the EU ship recycling regulation and the waste shipment regulation, which has somehow stricter requirements for EU flag vessels. So this is not creating the level playing field that we all wish for. But yeah, I have nothing more to say because everything was said before. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sveinung, please come back.
Because you asked a question, where was Norway? Actually, when it comes to the two conventions, the responsibility relies within the same ministry and within the same department. So meaning my colleague of the Basel Convention is fully aligned with our position, you know, towards Hong Kong. So we are coordinated, and actually also we organized an event together with the IMO and on the ship recycling issue. So then I think you have pointed towards that when it comes to how it is possible to take wise decision on the global arena is a little bit different on the various arenas, and some issue which can be quite obvious to agree on is because of decision making in some organizations not that easy after all, even though it should be straightforward. But let me then point towards a couple of things. Now we have the ship recycling countries as parties to the convention. And we also have the major part of the fleet, close to 60% of the fleet. But of course, we need to build the Hong Kong Convention stronger, having more parties coming into the convention, including from all around the world. So we increase the momentum, and I hope that will happen. Then we need to make the convention to demonstrate that it really works. Therefore, I'm very happy that the MEPC have now agreed to have an experience building phase to focus on proper implementation of the convention, and also further updates if needed. The negotiations stopped in 2009, so it was locked then. So we need to, on the basis of the experience building, see how we can continue to build the Hong Kong Convention strong. Looking into the various IMO convention, it is always a start and a continuation, which the parties decide, looking into how MARPOL started and what MARPOL is now, looking into how the various conventions have started and how it has developed by the decisions of the parties. So therefore, you know, I think it is one way forward, which is important and clear, that we cannot now lose the momentum on the Hong Kong Convention. And then the third issue, of course, is the regional regulation in the EU. You know, I think it is very important that, you know, the EU see that, well, it is actually to our benefit that we focus on the global regulation and make that strong, simply because looking into the EU regulation, it is very high degree of circumvention. And looking into the EU regulation market, it is really a minor market, meaning the big volume is recycled a totally different place than what the EU approves. And also, you know, flying totally different flags than the EU flag. So the point is, you know, I think to open the eyes and, well, why not build and to contribute to build the global framework strong, also as Europe, I think is an important issue. So meaning, you know, I'm optimistic on the future, really, but it requires that we do some good work together. I'm encouraged by what I see, that now the willingness among the ship recycling states, but then we cannot now fail on the implementation and enforcement of the convention. I have full trust that we will continue to work on that one. I think I stop now. Okay.
I think, Sveinung, that the recyclers, the actual recycling industry, needs to be encouraged. They have really dug deep in their pockets. They have done a lot of work. Some have not yet, and they will be doing it. So they need encouragement, and the encouragement should come from how the regulation is implemented properly, and ship owners respect things, and things are policed and so on. So all the things you said about the next phase, the next 2 years, are very important. They're important also to make sure that recyclers feel that they have taken the right step. Anne-Christine, I'll pass the floor to you, but I just wanted to say that I personally have been having such a exciting time that I've just noticed that we've done 45 minutes already. So we are very near kind of the cutoff time. We will go up to an hour, so another 15 minutes. So please, Anne-Christine, next.
Thank you, Nikos. I wanted to touch upon what you just said in terms of encouraging also the ship recyclers, and I think it's also really important that they also get valued and that there's an acknowledgement of how they have improved over all the recent years. So I think it's also really important that going forward there's like more distinction between it's not all bad what is happening in Southeast Asia in terms of recycling, but that there's been so much improvement and that standards are actually really, really high now. And I think there needs to be more transparency about that, especially for us, for example, as a financial institution. It would help tremendously if there's more transparency and more acknowledgement on what these yards have been doing over the past years and how they've raised standards themselves. And I think that should not be forgotten. And I can also echo what the other panelists said before, that it should be a combined effort from all members involved and from all parties involved into bringing a more cohesive framework now going forward, that everyone knows, what the standard is and how to apply and how to react on behave to different regulations.
Anne-Christine, I'm very happy to see financial institutions being involved in this discussion, meaning through yourself. In the past, and I'm talking, when I say past, I mean a few years also back, financial institutions took some very, I will use my language without too much diplomacy, crude positions. I think what was missing was really real understanding of what the issues are and how the industry works. Would you not value a visit to some of these yards and see really how it's going on? Because you hear stories from NGOs who, I mean, their livelihood is to put bad pictures. But wouldn't it be a good idea for financial institutions like insurers and like the banks to make a small team of representatives to go and see and then convey back to your colleagues that how things are? Are they as bad as we hear, or are they as good as Nikos and his friends are saying?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that would definitely help. And what we're, for example, also doing is that we have extensive conversations with our clients in terms of how are they approaching the yards, what can they showcase also to us, of like which yards they're using, certificates, and it helps a lot to just see that not everything is black and white, but that there's like a lot of in between. And we're also quite involved with external parties that are developing tools to assess yards and like give more transparency, because I think that's really what's needed. There needs to be more transparency and more education on what ship recycling yards have done over the past years and how Hong Kong Convention does pose a standard that is quite high, and that the EU is not the be all and end all, but that a lot of yards have actually the same, if not higher standards as the EU. And I think that needs to be showcased.
I believe yards will welcome your visit, because part of the encouragement we were speaking a moment before with Sveinung is exactly that. Not to be spoken badly by underwriters who don't trust them, by banks who are afraid of their name and so on, to show that things have happened. But hurrying a little bit, Anaëlle, please.
Yes, thanks, because I wanted to actually come back on Sveinung's point about the EU ship recycling regulation, because I think the EU got off on the right foot this year, since in February they published the evaluation of the ship recycling regulation, and they decided to not revise it and to actually focus on the international level, so on the Hong Kong Convention. So I think from this side, it's a good start to keep working to really focus on the Hong Kong Convention. So take it from there, also with the experience building phase. And I just want to mention that as long as we have the EU regulation, for us it's really important to increase the number of yards outside OECD countries to be approved on the EU list, because at the moment we really have a capacity issue. So it's really important. And I know audits are going on the side of the European Commission to possibly approve some of these yards outside the OECD countries. And this is something we really support. It's very important. Thanks.
Thank you. Petro.
Just for say that I think, of course, ship recycling yards in the known countries have made a lot of progress, but unfortunately, the EU regulation has failed to recognize that, and that shows how dogmatically the Commission sees that issue. It seems as if it's kind of a personal thing for those people, and I think it contributes to the idea of the general public that sometimes the European Commission is very far away from the reality of this world and really creates a competitive disadvantage to the EU rather than contributing to the opposite direction. So it's very important to open up the EU list to non-EU countries and non-OECD countries with the best of the facilities that there are in these countries. And there was a question about how we can, if we can say when a ship becomes a waste in the Hong Kong Convention, in the Basel Convention. I won't say that. The answer is yes, there are ways to do it. There are ways to do it, but at least if you are a European country, that has to do also with the waste directive, the EU waste directive, and it has to do with the ability of the state to prove that your intention was to go for recycling. So you have the notion of intention when it comes to waste treatment regulation, and that notion is by default open to interpretation, and that sometimes creates problems. Thanks.
Petro, I'm really getting into your own area of expertise here, but I believe that if the issue of equivalency and Basel versus Hong Kong is resolved, and ships that fall under Hong Kong Convention scope are not considered to be under the scope of Basel Convention, then I believe that European Commission will feel much more comfortable in moving towards Hong Kong Convention and away from EU ship recycling regulation. I believe presently their hands are tied. The hands of European Commission are tied in what they can do.
I don't agree with you that their hands are tied. I think they are, bureaucrats.
Well,
They're civil servants. Like I am a civil servant. I come from the administration. You know that the others don't know it. Okay, I was better than the others. That's why I became Secretary General. But I'm saying that they're just, low-level bureaucrats. That's the simple reality. They could do it. They could do it. The European super cycling regulation allows them to do it. That's why we have the EU list. And that's why you judge the equivalency in the context of the recycling regulation. They don't do it because they don't want to, day after day they get their salary, which is a very high salary, by the way, much higher than mine. Okay, so they're well off the way they are. They
Petro,
don't give less.
you seem to be in a hurry to retire much more than I am. I had another few questions, but we have very little time. One question I have, which if I can put to you very briefly. At the last COP, there was discussions, and NGO platform, as usual, was very involved. And they said, for the first time, they said, Hong Kong Convention, okay, enters into force, fine, let us have it. If we have to have it, let us have it. But we must have both, Hong Kong Convention and Basel. Both must apply. Now, to the untrained ear, this may sound, yes, it's both are good for different things. Let's put them together, and then we have the best of both worlds. Do you have any views on that? Sveinung.
Yes, I have views on that, because if both applies, as some understand it today, you will actually put the parties in a difficult situation, and also the industry in a very difficult situation. Because what is then totally legal and in compliance in one situation, in another situation will be totally illegal, and you can put the ship owner into jail. So that is you cannot deliberately go in that direction. And that also turns into, when will the Basel Convention apply, and when does it not apply? We need to make it, encourage compliance and not encourage circumvention, meaning that both the global regulation and the regular regulation should be harmonized. So meaning that we do not encourage that you need to flag out in order to be allowed to recycle your ship, a very good standard Hong Kong facility, and that you do not, stimulate that you have circumventions and, just adapt to the situation. So meaning, I think it is very important that a decision is taken which regime is the ruling regime, which everybody should ratify, implement, enforce, and make stronger. And that is the Hong Kong Convention. And then also this issue about equivalent level of control is just an artificial discussion, because what is if a convention rarely comes into application, seldom applies, how can it be equivalent to a convention which applies all the time? And how can the Basel Convention have any level control when they have very few requirements related to ship recycling? Just what they say when it comes from an OECD country to a non-OECD country, you cannot do it. So the point is, it is a kind of very artificial discussion, and it is really based on the willingness of member states and the parties to be brave and take a decision and on the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. George, please.
Yeah, I'll be brief, but I think the largest issue stems from, with both conventions in effect and not actual equivalency, that forces ship owners or ship operators to try to circumvent the rules instead of finding out what they can do to meet both of them. It almost forces them to try to find a legal way out or a legal way to go around, because there's a lot of responsibility put on a ship owner, legal responsibility, if they are following the Hong Kong Convention and they're seen at odds with what the Basel Convention requires. And I think there was another question in the chat regarding the need for solving this or getting an equivalency as soon as possible. I don't know if I see that even happening before Nikos. I think you said 2027 is COP 18, and that's potentially the first time that this would even be discussed for equivalency again. I know comments to the Secretariat, I think, are due in a few months, 15 November of this year, but I don't believe that the comments are just going to be put towards the working group, which is going to be put towards COP 18. So unfortunately, I think we're living in a world of dual equivalency, which is we have two of these laws, which means we don't necessarily have one. So I'm hoping that there's maybe some legal cases or precedents that are set that hopefully allow port state control and allow some of our vessel owners to have a little bit more clarity in terms of moving forward.
George, I hope you are wrong, but I fear that you are right. And I think if equivalency is to happen, equivalency really is a word. If the two conventions were equivalent, why bother all these years working on Hong Kong? Equivalency is the key that opens the door for Basel to say, as it's equivalent, it can take over the ships for us. The earliest it can practically be is 2019, I believe, because it needs to go to the next COP to decide to instruct the open-ended working group to work on that issue. Now, who does that? It's not me. We need governments for that. We have come to the end of our time, very unfortunately. I've seen some comments. There is a comment specifically for Petros to answer, if you can, Petro, in a few words. Is there one simple way to distinguish ship and waste under Hong Kong Convention and Basel Convention respectively?
Well, there is a way, but it's not very simple. That's what I meant with my previous intervention. Unfortunately, it's not very simple because when it comes to Basel Convention, at least for the EU, from the EU perspective, you have to take into account the intention of the ship owner. And the intention is something, it's what you can prove or you cannot prove, and that creates a legal mess sometimes, as Greece has chosen to consider the intention as the declared intention. So if a declares that goes for recycling, then it's under the radar of the Basel Convention, and they are detained, to put it into politically correct terms. If they don't declare it, we pretend we don't understand it. Sometimes we don't understand it. Some other times we do, but we pretend that we don't, and we let it be and let it go. Okay, because we are a practical people. But that notion of intention creates, legal uncertainty, I believe.
As a layman, please allow me to make an observation, and that is that Basel Convention back in 2000 or thereabout decided that ship can be a ship and can be a waste, and I believe that was the beginning of the problem. That decision was what's caused every complication, and they haven't taken the same decision about aeroplanes, which
or cars.
Cars you would
or
imagine,
trucks.
or trucks or trains, but you would imagine
That's
that
why we don't recognize the decision in Greece. We pretend that it doesn't exist. Okay, it's a bullshit, decision. A ship cannot be both.
How wonderful. Wonderful session. I thank you very much. I'm very sorry I have not responded to Jasmine Fichte, whom I met many years ago. It's a question that she's posed. We met in a conference in Dubai, but it's prehistoric times. And immediately we had an incredible argument. It was almost entertaining. She gave me the opportunity to have another one now by challenging the comments against AUESRR. Jasmine, we must make a special opportunity to have that new fight. But in essence, the reason I was so negative about, I was not positive about EUSRR is that it outrightly bans beaching, it bans landing, and it leaves you with nothing of practice for 16,000 ships in the next 10 years. So how is that wise? So that was the point I was trying to make.
Literally with China, I understood from what you said.
But China doesn't want anything. It's
It's another story. That's irrelevant. I'm a bureaucrat. That's irrelevant.
On behalf of GMS, I hope I have not made a mistake, that it is time to stop, yes? Have we all had enough?
Before we stop, Nikos, make sure that we all remember that this is a celebration. We celebrate the entry into force, and let's make it work.
I've been celebrating all this time. If I don't appear to be celebrating, it's only because of my facial expressions. I thank you very much for participating. It's been a great opportunity, and I was worried about how am I going to conduct this, but it's been fun. Thank you very much, all. Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.